Hello everyone, my name is Ann Théato and welcome to episode 67 of the Psychic Matters podcast. Please do subscribe to the show on your favourite podcast listening platform so you don't miss any of the upcoming episodes. And if you are enjoying this podcast, I'd love it if you could leave me a written review on Apple Podcasts or Podchaser. If you want to know how to leave a review, go to my website, anntheato.com, and look at the podcast tab and click on the link. Easy peasy. This week, I've been working away on my CSNUT lesson plans. And for those of you who don't know what CSNUT is, it's a teaching course run by the Spiritualists National Union. So I've been having a lot of fun putting those together, and I'm off to teach my classes on the 2nd and 3rd of July up at a place called the Barbanell Centre, which is in Stafford in the UK. And you know, it's actually a sister facility to the Arthur Findlay College. And I know you've all heard me talk an awful lot about the Arthur Findlay College, but the Barbanell Centre is also where it is at, and they run some fantastic courses. I've never actually been there, so I'm really looking forward to spending a weekend up there. But do look them up online because they have all kinds of courses going on all throughout the year, which you might find fascinating. In other news, I'm still working away on my fully downloadable course, Super Psychic, Learn the 7 Secrets to Unlocking Your Psychic Ability, where I'll be teaching you step-by-step transformative techniques to unlock your powerful psychic intuition and understand how to integrate it fully for fast-track results in your everyday life and your one-to-one readings. Because I want to show you how to eliminate fear, embrace your intuitive knowing, and step fully into your power, keeping it front and centre of your life, enabling you to 100% trust in your perceptions and live a life in which you can thrive and flourish. And I'll be taking a small selection of beta students through the course initially. So if that is something that really interests you, please do email me, ann@anntheato.com, and I'll send you details about that at the end of the summer. Now then, please get ready to listen to this week's episode, which is all about uncovering your intuition. My guest today is a psychic medium and teacher with some incredible life stories. She has often walked between two worlds, and she is one of those rare people who knows what death truly feels like. Having spent some time in the beauty, grace, and harmony of the spirit world, it was strangely difficult for her to come back to life confined to her physical body. She's here in the studio today to share just a little bit of her life story with us and to help us learn how we can each find a greater understanding of our own life's purpose. Sheryl Wagner, welcome to Psychic Matters.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much.
Oh, it's so lovely to see you, Sheryl. Thank you so much for agreeing to be with us today. And it's wonderful to have you here. We often read about people who have spiritual experiences where they can travel to the spirit world and spend a little bit of time there, perhaps either in a deep trance or deep meditation, sitting in the power, something like that, all of those different ways. And I know you speak of there being a vast difference between having a spiritual experience as opposed to having a real near-death experience where death is actually involved. Can you share a little bit with us about that?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So, and my experience is really, really unique because I've had both types of those experiences. So in the book, I talk about as a child having a sort of premonition of what was to come in the actual near-death experience. And then later having a really deep trance, just as you said, and having that experience of it. And a similar feeling. But when you have the near-death experience, it's the body is dying. And so there is all of this trauma and really on different levels. And so I feel like that is the main difference. The physical death is more traumatic and it doesn't really bring the same elated feeling, as we might get in a trance or we might get in a deep meditation. Not to say that those experiences are less than, but I do feel like it's important to know the difference. And I feel like that's mostly going to be important to people that are survivors, that have had near physical death experiences, and a way to really process that and give really the levity to that situation, and be able to use that word and have it mean what it means. It wasn't easy for me I wasn't able to say near death experience for, I think, about 10 years until after it happened. Even though I was told that by doctors and things, it was really hard for me to claim it. And it was a struggle. And I do feel like it's sort of a barometer of my own healing, to the point where, how people that annoy us are sort of really good spiritual teachers. So when I could feel that annoyance happening for me, when I would hear other people say I've had a near-death experience, and it was really just something that happened from the comfort of their bed or something like that, and it was amazing. But me, the human part of me, my ego would kind of chime in and say, well, that's not right. And I feel like for me, that was really a directive to be able to say that for myself, and to be able to ask for what I needed and the support I needed. So I certainly don't want to, be the authority on what other people can call their experiences, because that's not helpful to anyone. But for me, it bothered me. And so it was a message to me that I had a lot of healing to do. And then I needed to look into what had happened deeper and process it in a deeper way.
Yeah, that's really interesting. About it was a personal lesson for you to learn from that. So maybe you could, if you feel comfortable, to tell us a little bit about how that came about, that NDE for you.
Oh, yeah. I mean, how it actually happened. Yeah. So it was in 2004, and I had a really traumatic birth experience with the birth of my first son. And I was really young. I was, I think, 22. And I had, no issue. Pregnancy was, no issues at all. And during the delivery, which was traumatic in its own, a lot of people have these traumatic sort of deliveries. I had this rare condition, and it's called HELP syndrome. And I believe it stands for, I'm going to try, high blood pressure, elevated liver, and low platelets. And so it's basically the body is shutting down, your organs are failing. And so the only cure is to deliver the baby. And so they're, frantically trying to do that for hours. And because it was more complicated, because they had the cord wrapped around him and he was in distress. And at the same time, I was having seizures, so eclampsia and seizures, and found out much later that a lot of the pain in my chest that I was experiencing that made things more complicated was due to gallbladder attacks, if you can believe. So just in addition. So I end up being back in the hospital only a few weeks later to get that sorted out, because it caused a lot of internal damage as well. And so while all that's happening and the body's shutting down and seizures, I'm losing a lot of blood. And so that's really where the doctor felt like the near-death experience comes in, because your organs are shutting down, they're failing, and you've lost so much blood, you just are at that place. And so for me, that experience, trauma in the brain is just not the same as a memory. And so it took a long time to kind of come out and be processed.
I mean, it's so traumatic to, when you speak about that, all those awful health conditions and that terrible situation that you found yourself in when we're having purportedly one of the most beautiful experiences we could have, giving birth to a new soul here. It must have been absolutely awful for you. Do you remember what it was like, sort of not being in your body?
Eye-Opening Moments podcast are real-life stories of adversity, encounters, and perspectives. They are moments that can lift your spirits, give you some food for thought, or move you. For the introspective mind that likes to reflect, discover, and find solutions or meaning in a complex life, listen to Eye-Opening Moments podcasts.
I do. And that is the part that I liked to remember because it is such a stark difference. You know, I remember just being so uncomfortable. And you think that if you're dying and you're going through all of that, there would be, you just would be in agony, but I would focus on certain things. Like I remember my arms being tied down. I remember the nausea, and it just, my attention went between those sort of two complaints. And I remember just being really, really close to what I felt like was the end. And the baby, my son, was delivered, and them asking me to turn my head and look at him. And I did. And I, at the time, remember thinking, I can't believe they are asking me to do this. I can't believe that someone is asking me to turn my head, because it took everything I had to just from right to left to rotate my head and look at him. And when I did look at him, I saw him and he looked healthy in this sort of bleary, puddle of blankets. And my first thought was, I want to die. And that's very big. So there's lots of feelings that, I had in that moment and that I had after that, being a mother, a really young mother who's not prepared for this. And you think when you see your baby, you're going to have so many thoughts and feelings, but I want to die is really that's not one that we plan. But I remember having that feeling. And then I closed my eyes and I just left. And I just felt so amazing. I just felt like the sweetest surrender to be pulled underneath what felt like water. But I then felt myself leaving and to go above my body. And just the sweetest euphoric feeling. There really isn't anything else like it. And just watching what they were doing down below. And I was able to describe to my ex-husband, who was in the room at the time, exactly what was happening, like various instruments and things. You're looking at your body being taken apart. And then that was all gone. And then I remember being in a very different place that felt so I was free from all of it. Do
you remember being joined by anybody, or was it just the feeling of this beautiful sweetness and harmony?
Yeah, I was joined by people. And at the time, I didn't have a great awareness of who they were, although they were familiar to me because I had said in the beginning, I had a sort of premonition of this experience, and I had met what I now consider to be a spirit guide, someone that is with me on the other side. And he was there in the room with me. And so I had that recognition, sort of just a feeling, but I also saw great grandparents of mine. And in particular, it was a great grandmother who was very frightening to me as a child because she had progressed Alzheimer's. And when I visited her, I was only about 2 or 3 years old. So I was just sort of a very shy, quiet child anyway. So I was nervous to be around her. I didn't understand. But when she was in this, it's like a sort of little white room, almost looked like a room off of the hospital, but above, and just all white. And very, very small, but I didn't feel claustrophobic. And so she was there, my great grandmother, but not seeming scary at all, just seeming so lovely. And she looked older. She looked how I remembered her, but without that condition, just sort of smiling at me. And it seemed like I was only there for a minute, but I didn't come back into, this world and open my eyes for another 12 hours. So the time really is not what we think. In my experience, it was very different.
Oh my goodness, it sounds unbelievable, really, an unbelievable experience. Did you ever go back since then? I mean, how many years is it since that happened to you, Sheryl?
Well, my son is going to be 18. So yeah, in the fall. So it will be 18 years in the fall.
Wow. And in these last 18 years, have you ever gone back to that place where you visited your grandparents again, or you've seen some of these spirit guides again?
Yeah, I have. I do feel, and like most mediums, I do have a way to visit with them, right? I have a sort of meeting place and I can visit with them and have my like team meetings and staff meetings and things like that. But what really stands out is when I began developing my trance work, and I was able to work with some really just brilliant teachers that I feel were both trauma informed and had an understanding of what I had gone through and could recognize it for some reason. I seem to just be really lucky to be with those right people that were able to explain to me what was going on. And I did have an experience the second time I was at Arthur Findlay College, and trance experience where the whole situation was explained to me. And I felt again like I had the breathing support on. I could sort of feel the breath coming in and out of me, and I could feel my guides there, and I could feel my great grandmother. Now that you mention it, she was there, just not speaking to me, and they were just explaining to me that I wasn't alone, and that just telepathically, so I don't have the words, but my understanding was that the premonition that happened was somehow helping me. It was somehow familiar to me on a deeper subconscious level, like as a child, to have had that beautiful visit with them in that white room and then have that be something pleasant. It was almost like I just feel really representative of the spirit world, because they don't want to scare us, they don't want to harm, they want to help us. And so I feel like that was a gift to me as a child. And then as a 22-year-old, to have that familiarity. And then I think I was 37 or 38 years old. I wrote it in my book because it's all sort of divided by about 7-year or 14-year increments, which I find really interesting. And that whole experience was recapped for me. And really the message was that I wasn't alone, and that it was for a bigger purpose.
That's amazing. And you first had a premonition that this would happen to you when you were 8 years old. Is that right?
Yeah. I think I was 7 or 8 years old. I just remember what house we lived in. So we moved a lot when I was a kid. But I had been walking around this room that I found really interesting in our home. We had just moved into a new home. And the thing that I liked about this room was that it was all white. So it had like white carpet and white walls, and it was very sunny. And so, all the light and the shadows coming in, and, in retrospect, I had a lot of objective clairvoyance, just sort of seeing things in those patterns and those walls and things that I thought that I was making up, because I have a very, good imagination. And all of a sudden I become aware of a lady, and I'm sort of just following her around the room for some reason, and just, assuming I'm making her up. And then she said to me that she liked my pajamas. And then I thought, I just got this feeling, not a bad feeling, but an intuition feeling of, what? You're really here. And why would she like these pajamas? They're just like outer space pajamas, and they're not anything. She's wearing this like sort of flowy thing. And I just thought that was strange. And then she encouraged me to keep following her, and she told me to sit down in the corner of the room. And then the next thing I knew, I was asleep. And I never slept as a child. Still, I cannot nap. It's just not something I can do. I never napped as a baby. I hear about it all the time. My mom will tell you. I was not a napper, but I fell asleep for a long time, long enough that people were looking for me. And I was I imagine a deep sleep, because I just was in the house and didn't hear anyone until my mom was sort of shaking me awake. And I just remember that feeling of being with the lady and being with some other people, and that place, that sort of light place, and not wanting to come back, being very angry to be shaken awake. And then, of course, my mom decided I was sick and I needed to go to bed for the rest of the day. And I couldn't get back into it. I couldn't, and then it was no naps again. So.
My goodness, it's amazing that that it's come every 14 years. Do you think that's it? Think another 14 years is going to go by and something else is going to happen?
I know. Well, I do make that joke because, and I've had sort of lots of revelations the last few years. And, I used to work in finance. I was, finance manager, and I worked in the car industry and for 17 years. And then I, came out and, told people I'm a medium, and, and then I come out and told people I'm gay. And so I sometimes joke, like, maybe the next thing is I'm going to tell people I'm an alien from another planet. But if I do know, that would be fine. Then I can let you know. And I think I probably have another 11 years or so to go.
Oh, well, you've got a little while.
Yeah.
So you used to work in finance. So how did that come about? So where does the mediumship fit in? When did you, you had this experience when you were 22, and obviously you must have been psychic and mediumistically aware since a child. So when did you decide, I'll go down the mediumship route and abandon the finance?
Yeah. Well, I don't feel like it was necessarily my choice, my conscious choice. As a human, I feel like sometimes what the soul wants is just stronger. And so I worked for my family. My family has a business, a car dealership. And I struggled for a long time, I would say, when I was younger, to kind of find my place. I didn't get diagnosed with ADHD until I was an adult. And so I really didn't know what was wrong with me. I had lots of jobs and food service and things like that. I always felt like something was wrong with me. And once I got that diagnosis, I had been working for my family for a while and doing okay. But once I got that diagnosis and I started to understand myself and treat myself as just a neurodivergent person, I was able to train to be a finance manager. And really, again, just luck. Our manager had walked out on a very busy sales weekend. And, the general manager just was like, you need to go and do this, and I've always been sort of ready to like jump into chaos and try. So I did that. It was probably one of the most difficult things I've ever done. And it was probably one of the most difficult things I've ever done to learn finance the way that I am. But I did learn it, and I became very good at it. And that was really the first time in my life that I felt that I was good at something, and I felt like I had a place. And I really clung to that more than anything, because it allowed me to sort of put my sensitivity away and put all the things about myself that I wasn't ready to look at away, right? Like, I was married to a man at the time and I was gay. So I was already putting so many things away and struggling with an eating disorder and really, using like substances and things like that just to cope, and really in survival mode, and really not wanting to look at any of those deeper emotional aspects of me. And so kind of putting the intuition away. And so I worked there for years after that, years after getting good at it. I worked there, and then things started happening that made it just too difficult to push it away. I almost felt that I didn't have a choice.
So when you say things happening, what sort of things were happening?
Yeah. So one really big thing was my son was having a mental health crisis, and I couldn't be with him. He had to be hospitalized overnight, and he was very young. And that started to trigger these deeper feelings. And I have PTSD. I've worked through, I had been working with therapists through the PTSD since then, because every year I would wake up on his birthday and I would smell the iodine. I would feel I was in the hospital. I would relive that. I had flashbacks. And that was really difficult. And people that I worked with knew that. They knew that October was hard for me, and would be supportive. That was like sort of a one time I would have to explain, because it was just part of how I presented. And so when he started to struggle, I think that not being able to, feeling helpless, I think really pushed me to look at these emotional parts of myself that I had been hiding. And I was in such a bad way, physically, emotionally, mental health wise. I really wasn't eating. I remember thinking, I hope I don't pass out while I'm driving home. I really wasn't taking care of myself. And I just was barely getting by. I went I remember I had to leave work because I started having these panic attacks. I had a sense that I was falling out of an airplane. That's how I felt. And having my sister take me to the ER or take me to a doctor, and I would have to write down notes because I couldn't even tell them what was happening. But I remember one time going and having to have one of the notes say that I had just had walking pneumonia. My son was in this crisis, and all I wanted to do was to go back to work. I just wanted them to give me something, just like to give me this prescription or this magic, trick that could just get me back into work and just focus so that I could do the one thing that I felt that I was good at. And so I wouldn't have to look at all of this. And of course, there isn't anything that someone can do when we reach that point of burnout where we're not taking care of ourselves. Even if we look, we are. I remember that same year applying for life insurance, and I was so relieved because I didn't know what they would say, because I knew I wasn't healthy on some levels, but I had like ultra preferred was our rate. And it was because I was thin. That was what it was. That was the only thing it could be based on, because nothing else about me was healthy. And so just having to look at that, and there isn't anything that a doctor can tell you. You've got to make those changes. And as soon as I started to, that's when the mediumship kind of came just like crashing in. They sort of, I feel the spirit world, they will take those opportunities, especially in the beginning when they're trying to open it back up, to like use that energy and kind of make a big impact. And so I was just seeing things, hearing things. It was constant.
And your son, how old was he at the time of his crisis?
I think he was 13.
Is he a spiritual young man? Does he have experiences himself?
Yeah, both my kids have had experiences, mediumship type experiences. Yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, you've been through so much. You couldn't even speak the words of the trauma that your son was going through, and you carry all your own trauma. It must have been just so difficult. So you say mediumship comes crashing in. How does that present itself to you then?
Well, I remember I hadn't really heard of mediumship or medium. And I definitely knew that there was, this other world, that there was like the unseen world. But the word mediumship, I had never watched a medium. My great grandmother used to read the tea leaves. Like that was really all my experience. But I was going to a therapist at the time. And I shared with her some things. And I said, I feel like I've had someone watching me, just for decades, just someone's watching me. It's like I'm on the Truman Show or something. And I said, you know what I mean? And she said, no, I really don't. And so she said, maybe in my loneliness, I had sort of made that up or invented that. And then I thought, okay, maybe. And I started sharing more and more with her because I started to hear things outside my mind, which quite scared me, especially with my son being hospitalized. I thought, okay, this is because of me. And now I'm hearing things. And I remember one time where I was so distraught and I was really praying to my grandmother who had passed a few years earlier and asking her to please help me. Just help me. I just need help. I can't do this alone. I need your help. And I heard very clearly outside my mind, in her voice, she said, it's going to be okay, sweetheart. And I had forgot that she used to call me sweetheart because she herself had Alzheimer's and it had just been so long. But when I heard that, it wasn't just the words, it was that, well, first I had heard it outside my mind. So that was quite unbelievable. But I just knew, just hearing that, I just knew that it was going to be okay. And so I shared that with a therapist. And she suggested that I go and see a medium myself. And so I did. And that ended up being just a really affirming experience. Once I saw how it worked and sort of what another person was doing and how someone could, communicate with past, people and then just share their messages, I thought, okay, this is what's happening. This is who I'm talking to. And it became really clear to me after that. And then it just sort of like the floodgates opened. I started, people would be coming in to do their finance paperwork, and they would take out photos of their loved ones and show them to me. not knowing, having no idea that I had that, experience. I remember one man came in and he had a young son who passed of a heart attack, and he was about in his 40s, and he took out a picture of this man, and I just felt like we were having this conversation. I was like, this is too much. Now I've got to do your paperwork and try to sell you insurance. It just wasn't the right fit anymore. And so I let them know that I was going to be, cutting back my hours more and more. And I still wanted to be around for my son more, right? Because I hadn't been taking very good care of myself, and I hadn't been around as much. And so I decided I was going to let our nanny go, and I was going to be home more. And once I let them know that, I was given an ultimatum at some point, and it was that you need to either come back working like 60 hours a week, or you just can't work here anymore. And so then that was really, really easy for me because then it was like I didn't have a choice. And so that's when I left.
An ultimatum is a great thing sometimes, isn't it?
It is. Yeah.
Draw a line in the sand. Okay, this is my new direction. Yeah, very good. Just going back a little bit, of your loneliness, and it comes up time and again in your book, which we haven't mentioned. Well, you've mentioned your book, but let me mention it now officially. Uncovering Intuition, Guidance, Inspiration, and Exercises to Unlock Your Inner Wisdom by Sheryl Wagner. And how long has this book been in print, Sheryl?
I published it on February 8th, which was my 40th birthday.
Congratulations. So it's fairly new. It's out this year.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you speak in that. It's such a beautiful book, and it's so fascinating following your story and everything that's happened to you. And one of the themes in it is this sort of loneliness and this feeling of sort of not understanding where you fit in somehow. And you spoke earlier about ADHD. Now, I don't know so much about ADHD. Maybe some of the listeners don't either. And you said you were a neurodivergent person, but I don't know what that means either. How did that sort of manifest, or how did that exhibit itself in your behavior or the way that you thought about the world?
Yeah, so ADHD is different for everyone, but I have the inattentive kind of ADHD. So we tend to think about ADHD, especially, when I was a kid, as like boys that are kind of running around and bouncing off the wall or can't sit still. And mine is very internal. So it's just thoughts that are not able to focus or control. And it made school really challenging for me. It made, paying attention, following through on tasks really challenging for me. And I just sort of always had a feeling of like, I have no idea what's going on, and I would, show up and try and pay attention, but I really never knew what was going on in my school or like with friends, because you miss a lot when you're sort of distracted in your own mind. You miss a lot of social cues and things like that. And it becomes really difficult to just navigate that if you don't have that information about yourself. And if teachers or parents don't have that information about you, there's not really like a lot of compassion, for you. I can remember my mom being really upset in kindergarten because my teacher, would say things to me like, why are you staring at me like I have 10 heads? And I just had no idea what that meant. I was just like, what? Why? I don't know. I'm trying to figure out what you're saying, or someone would be asking me a question. I just wouldn't respond. And so I think that processing speed was part of it. And at the same time, I am a sensitive person. I talk about being a highly sensitive person. I feel like that is important for people to look at themselves. And I was definitely a sensitive kid, and I didn't speak. And so I didn't speak a lot. And all my childhood things and all the papers and things my mom has, we were looking at them a couple of years ago. She's like, I don't remember you not talking. And I said, what do you mean? And she's taking out all these notes, and it's like all these notes saying how I won't speak, I won't respond unless they force me to. And I do remember that. So I never really got into the habit of relating to others. I think partly because I felt like I didn't know how.
Yeah, I mean, it's extraordinary. It's just so extraordinary. So all of these things have happened to you. You've had all these extraordinary experiences, and it makes you such a beautifully unique individual. How does that feed into the work that you're doing now as a medium?
Oh, yeah, that's interesting. I feel like everyone that is doing mediumship is quite unique, don't you find? Because we're all those experiences are so needed, right? Like when someone comes in and I have a session with them, to hold space for a variety of experiences, to be able to recognize their experience, their pain, their loss, their loneliness, to be able to hold space for that. I feel like that's needed. And I have, a great respect for people that do this work, because we really do need to have a certain amount of pain in life in order to be successful at it. Not to say we all have to have a near-death experience or we'll have to have trauma, but I think that at different levels in mediumship, we have to have suffered, we have resilience. And I feel that's why, I certainly don't know, but I feel that's why the spirit world choose us for this work, because we have life experience and understand and can hold compassion for others.
Yeah, I think a lot of mediums certainly have resilience. That's
Yeah.
a very good word.
Yes, they do. They
Oh,
do.
goodness, yes. And in your book, in your fabulous, fantastic book, you talk a lot about using our intuition. Maybe you could say a little bit about that, how people might be able to use theirs.
Yeah, absolutely. Because we all have intuition. And so there's no special skills required. And I feel like sometimes people are afraid to acknowledge maybe things that they're becoming aware of or things that are happening to them, because there is a certain amount of stigma or fear around it, or like, I don't want to see anything bad happen. Right. And I really just want people to know that intuition is this wisdom. It's you, right? It's not this other force. It's not this other thing that's coming to you. It is you. It is the soul. It is within you. And we have access to this. And so it might not always make sense to us what our intuition is directing us toward, but it's always going to elevate us. It's always going to take us where we need to go. And so I just want everyone to know and to be empowered with it, and to know that they can develop their intuition and be so connected to their intuition on their own. They don't need me. They don't need a book. They don't even need a book. They don't even need a teacher. Those things are helpful, but ultimately each one of us has intuition, and it can really help us to live a life that is aligned and grounded in our own truth. And so that's why I want to talk about intuition with people, because we all have it, and I'm able to recognize it so strongly in others. And sometimes they don't recognize it in themselves.
Yeah, you say that, in your book, you say society doesn't value or appreciate our sensitivity.
Yeah. It's so often I say to somebody, I direct them to the Highly Sensitive Person website. It's Dr. Elaine Aron, and she has a self-assessment where you can see if you're a highly sensitive person. And I'll say that to someone, and so often they sort of recoil, or I can feel they're offended. Or I'll say to someone, do you think of yourself as being sensitive? And they'll say something like, oh, I try not to think about that. And it's like, your sensitivity is such a gift. And there is a small percentage of the population that is highly sensitive. And those of us are going to be more intuitive, because we're, especially in mediumship, if someone is practicing in mediumship, we're so sensitive that we're sensitive of energy in the unseen world. And so mediumship and intuition itself is a sensitivity. And it also comes with other sensitivities. So, lots of mediums, and I'm guessing I'm not the only one that's sort of sensitive to loud noise or bright lights or lots of crowds. We might like some of those things sometimes, but we have certain preferences. And I do feel like in being in this work, we get to know those preferences pretty quickly, because our energy is our currency. Like, this is our work and how, we make a living. So we need to make sure our energy is where it needs to be. And so knowing what you're sensitive to is really important. But yeah, I feel like as a society, we don't value like feelings as much as we value like facts and results. And I feel like in the future that will become more balanced as more people are awakening and more people are understanding their own sensitivity as a gift, because people that are sensitive are also going to have a greater depth of emotion, I feel. And so maybe that's greater joy, as well.
Yeah, I think that's really lovely and really relevant as well. And you also say in your book that it's not a life sentence to feel the emotions of other people, which I found really interesting line, because sometimes we think we're so hypersensitive. How do we deal with it? So talk perhaps a little bit about energy and where we find our boundaries.
Oh yeah, boundaries. For anybody that I'm coaching or teaching or a workshop, there's always going to be part of boundaries in there because we all need it, myself included. Finding those boundaries, managing that energy. And so, yeah, the word empath I talk about in the book, and I love so many people that call themselves empaths, but I don't love the word because I do feel that it gets misrepresented and that it gets sort of thrown around as, well, this is your diagnosis or this is your condition. You're an empath. And so you're going to feel everyone else's feelings and there's nothing you can do about it. When really, highly empathic people, of course, exist, and I am one. However, setting boundaries is the way that we can be empowered with that. So I would say a couple things that really can help if you are a highly empathic person or you consider yourself an empath, we'll use the word, is to, recognize when you are being pulled into someone else's energy, like when your energetic boundaries are being blurred or violated. And so, boundaries just being the space between us and another person, and then energetic boundaries being that energetic space. And so a lot of times I see people without really knowing it is happening, just sort of getting wrapped up in someone else's energy. And a couple quick things you can do to counteract that is to start to become aware of the differences between you and them. And so this sounds really simple, but if I start to feel that I'm becoming energetically enmeshed with someone, all of a sudden their problems are my problems, their feelings are my feelings, and things like that, I need to somehow break away from it. And so what I could do is just take a minute and notice like the physical differences between myself and them. And so maybe I am sitting to the left and they're sitting to the right. Maybe I have dark hair and they have light hair, and just start noticing those differences. And that psychologically will give us that separation. Also notice where they are in space, like you're across the world from me. Someone might be across the desk from me, but noticing my space, noticing where I am. And I'll really encourage anyone that's dealing with that in the moment to take a moment and affirm yourself. And so for me, this would look like, I'll put my hand on my heart, take a breath, and just affirm myself. Maybe I say like, I'm Sheryl, I'm sitting in my office, I'm recording this podcast, and just kind of reminding myself. If I have an old feeling from childhood that's coming up, I might remind myself, you're 40 years old, and affirm that. And that can really help. That can really help to kind of start to make that immediate break where we recognize it. And then to take it a step further, identifying our feelings is really helpful, because at that point, if we start to become sort of drawn into someone else's energy, we probably really know how they feel, right? We know how they feel about every aspect of the situation. Start to identify how you feel. And you might be surprised. I myself, when I do that, it's like, oh, I feel uncomfortable. Oh, I didn't realize that, oh, I feel sort of annoyed, and then we can start to identify our own feelings, and that can help to separate the energy. And again, it's not like a supernatural thing that's occurring. It's really energy, and a lot of it is psychological. And so, of course, I believe in supernatural phenomena and mysticism, and I love it. But I just don't think that we need to make every interaction supernatural. People aren't like bad or wrong or taking our energy supernaturally. We are just empathic. And I feel like taking responsibility for that is empowering.
I think that's beautiful. And you've taken responsibility for a lot of things in your life so far. You're still very young, aren't you? Just being 40 at the moment, but you've got these 2 children. You and your ex-husband are the best of friends, you say, still very, very close, which is a wonderful result to have, and a beautiful thing for a family going forward, to keep things friendly despite the fact that you're not together. And you've identified your own new feelings of being gay and wanting to move in that direction with your partner. So how does it feel? One of the things you say in your book is the conscious and unconscious mind and the physical body and our truth all must be in alignment. So are you feeling now at 40 perhaps a little bit more in alignment?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's so freeing. And I, I always knew I was gay. I think I didn't have the words to describe this, and I wasn't available. I talk about in the book some earlier trauma in sexual assault that happened to me when I was 14. And so I wasn't available to have healthy relationships, and I got into quite a bit of trouble, I would say, not blaming myself, but I really put myself in unsafe situations after that because of that. And I didn't feel safe in romantic relationships and ended up, being in an abusive relationship and then meeting my ex-husband, who has always been a great friend to me. And he had been, supportive for years of we were going to eventually, be friends and split. And that was really a big time for me, coming out, because everyone close to me knew, and certainly he knew, but coming out to the kids, when they were teenagers, and coming out to my community, I don't think I realized how much I needed that. I really needed that. And once I did that, things just started opening up more. And then I started writing the book. And then I met my partner, Rachel, who we're getting married in November. And it just felt the feeling of peace of being in that alignment finally. It's just very freeing. It's very freeing, to be in your truth.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. So I think you're a wonderful inspiration for a lot of people listening who maybe feel that there are ways in their life that they could align with their purpose or listen to what is really happening for them and move themselves forward in a way that is more beneficial, perhaps.
Yeah, absolutely. And I hope that people do. I have a lot of people that I meet that share with me, I really relate to this. And I feel like a lot of times we don't share certain parts of our story. We hold back certain parts of our story. And the more we can talk about these things and give ourselves permission to be in our truth, to be in our alignment, to, not worry about what others think about our life and our choices, even people who love us, because there'll be plenty of people watching us do things that scare them, that will be worried about us. And ultimately, we need to claim the authority over our life. And the more that people can do that, I feel like that creates a world where other people are willing to do that.
I think coming to see somebody like you when we're troubled and challenged in our life must be such a healing experience because of everything that you've been through and everything you can add to a session. So what is it you're offering, Sheryl, if people wanted to have a one-on-one with you over Zoom?
Oh, sure. Yeah. So right now I offer intuitive readings, or psychic readings, or mediumship readings. And so I do sessions with people from all over the world through Zoom. And I also have an office where I live in Canton, Massachusetts, which is near Boston. So I have a nice in-person space as well. And I also teach a couple weekly classes, one in person and one online, and where we develop, for someone that's looking to develop mediumship or develop intuition. Yeah.
You've also on your website got some beautiful guided meditations. Talk to us about those.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. I do have a guided meditation right now for anyone that purchases the book. Actually, you get this guided meditation, and it's to connect to your own energy. And I love the concept of that, connecting to our own energy, even though it seems really simple. But I feel like the more we can do that, connect to our own energy and understand our own energy, the more we can understand our intuition. And it sort of goes hand in hand. So yeah, I'm happy for people to go and check those out. And meditating, for me is obviously part of my work and part of how I was able to write this book. But I feel like the first step is really understanding and knowing ourselves.
So how do people find you? What's your website and how do they purchase your book?
So my website is SherylWagnerMedium.com, Sheryl with an S. And my book is on the website if you'd like a signed copy. And if you'd like to get a download of the meditation instantly sent to you, you can buy it on my website. If you would like to just order it online, you can get it through any online store. All of the major booksellers have my book.
And you offer tarot mentorship and trance mentorship. Could you tell us a little bit about that? What might be coming up for people in that regard?
Yeah, absolutely. I do offer tarot mentorship. That's one of my favorite things to teach. I love the tarot. There is a chapter in the book about tarot. It's so fun for me to teach and be able to support others, and kind of most of the clients I've had are people that are like ready to go and work with the public and just kind of wanting that last like validation or confirmation, or maybe having some blocks with it. And so I love mentoring people with tarot. I've also helped, quite a few beginners to just start the process, because again, I feel like it's like intuition. We can be afraid of it, but tarot is for everyone. Go, if you want a tarot deck, go and buy it, please. And just start using it for yourself. It's just a nice reflective tool to work with and to get to know yourself and your intuition better. And I also offer trance mentorship to students that I already work with. That way I can, kind of know where they're at in a psychological state. I'm not a therapist at all, but just knowing that someone has support, because trance is deeper work and it's transformative. And I feel like that's something I don't offer lightly, but I do encourage people to look into it and find someone, a teacher or mentor, or someone that can help guide them through that work. I've been very lucky to have that in my life. So I do offer that to students that I know that I've worked with.
Fabulous. And I'll put all those links in the show notes for this episode, but so people can find them easily and find you on the internet. Sheryl, what's next for you coming up this year? Obviously, you're doing your readings continually and you're teaching. You've got your young boy still. I know he's 18. He's a grown man now, but he'll be off to university and there's still some parenting to be done there. What else is coming up for you? What are your plans?
Yeah, well, I am doing these classes online. I've been working through the book. And so we've had these nice intuitive groups meet online. And so we just finished the chapter on energetic boundaries. And next month, we'll be doing a class on being in alignment and these intuition development exercises. And this is a really nice group that's come together. It's the kind of group that you can join or jump into anytime. So you don't have to sign up for a long period of time. I'm not usually a fan of that. I like people to kind of be able to drop in and then go if they need to. I'm going to be traveling for a lot of June. Rachel and I are taking like an early honeymoon and before the wedding, so we don't want to wait. And but when I get back, I'm going to resume coaching. I have a couple coaching clients I'll start with, and just to be honest, the last couple of years with the book and everything, I just want to be in my life. I just, I'm trying to kind of put myself not on a timeout, but like a mini timeout, and not really launch anything big, and just answer the calls that really, that really come to me. I am teaching one online workshop this summer about demonstrating mediumship that will be in person. But besides that, I just want to be in my life and take the opportunities that come to me and have some time to, embody everything.
Yeah, they sound like really, really good plans. Let's face it, Sheryl, you've had enough excitement in your life.
I feel
you don't need any more high drama, right?
No, I don't.
It's been so lovely. Thank you so much for sharing a little bit about yourself and the work that you're doing out there. It just sounds like you're such a beautifully sensitive worker for spirit and for people here in the physical world. You truly have a foot in both worlds. And thank you so much, Sheryl, for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Anne.
Well, that was psychic medium Sheryl Wagner. Please do go and buy her book, Uncovering Intuition. And if you buy it directly from Sheryl's website, you will get a beautiful meditation as well. Thank you for listening to Psychic Matters. For those who are interested in mediumship, you might consider coming along on a Tuesday for a free event. It's free, it happens every single Tuesday throughout the year, and it's called the Mediumship Hour, and it takes place online from 7 p.m. UK to 8 p.m. and just jump on Zoom. Joining details are under events on my website, and I work with one other medium, usually either Leslie Malone or Tyrone Cusack, and sometimes we have surprise guests who come along too and share the platform with us. So we work for 1 hour each week to bring through messages of love and guidance from your loved ones in the spirit realms, and we'd love to see you there. Once again, if you want to pick up details for that event, the Zoom link, etc., go to my website, anntheato.com, ANNTHEATO.com, and you can pick up the Zoom link by clicking on the events tab. And if you want to pick up the show notes for this episode, go to the podcast tab and click on the podcast page. You'll see Sheryl's beautiful photograph up there. So click on that and it will take you to the show notes for this episode, which includes a full transcript and all the resources that have been mentioned. And there'll be a link there which will take you directly to Sheryl's book. Have a fabulous couple of weeks, everyone. And don't forget what Sheryl said, that your intuition is the soul of you, the wisdom within, and we all have access to it. So do remember to listen to your intuition this week and begin to live a life that is ever more in alignment with your soul's purpose. My name is Ann Théato, and thank you for listening to Psychic Matters.